Cyberpunk 2077, Red Dead Redemption 2, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. These are the three games that fundamentally have changed the way I look at games. For Red Dead 2, it's the beautiful story and characterization of its main character. For Cyberpunk, it's the amazing world building and lore. And for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, it's the sheer immersion and player choice that this game brings. These three games aren't held up to some benchmark. They are the benchmark. Every story I play gets compared to RDR2. Every world's lore and vibe gets compared to Cyberpunk. And now, every game's decision making and immersion will get compared to KCD 2. I mentioned in my Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 review, there's nothing more immersive than real life. And when you can get as close to real life as possible while maintaining the integrity of the gameplay and the systems, you create something special. And I said that KCD 1 struggled in that respect. KCD 2 fixed every glaring issue I had with the first one and amped up everything else times 100. This game is a triumph in what it sets out to accomplish. It's beautifully realistic, has streamlined gameplay and combat mechanics, and features a story and quest design almost as open-ended as real life. So let's talk about KCD 2, what it does amazing, what little things can be improved, and why Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. Let's start with the world. Straight up, this is one of the best worlds of any game I've ever played. Now, in case you don't know, KCD 2 is set in 15th century Bohemia. Now, I mentioned this in my KCD 1 review, but I think that the area that this game is based off of is gorgeous, but not remarkable. It's a lot of grass, forest, and some hills. It doesn't have towering mountains, or dense rainforests, or waterfalls, or snowy landscapes. It's all green and mostly flat, but that's okay. Bohemia is expertly created in this game as it was in the first game. The main difference I see in this game is just sheer size. The first game's map was honestly kinda small, and that was completely fine because Warhorse, the developers, wanted to keep the level of detail consistent throughout the entire map. Ratai, the main city in the first game, wasn't entirely too big. In KCD 2, the world is simply massive. First off, there are two regions in this game. The first region is big. I would say almost the same size as the first game's entire map, probably just a little bit smaller. But the second region is just massive. The second region hosts Kuttenberg, an insanely massive city with tons of stuff to do, people to see, and activities and side quests to get engaged in. It felt like this is what the developers wanted to make all along in KCD 1, but couldn't due to technical limitations and potentially even funding. This time around, they went balls to the walls, man, and gave us two beautiful maps. The same amount of detail that they put into the map in KCD 1 is still present here in KCD 2 as well, even more so in fact. I love the fact that just because the map got bigger, it didn't get less detailed. The map is also just as immersive as ever. I mentioned how in KCD 1, the sheer realism of the map is what made it so immersive. The fact that the towns and villages look probably how they would have looked in real life 15th century Bohemia is so cool. The graphics also got a noticeable upgrade. The foliage, the sky, and particularly the weather effects are amazing. I've experienced a thunderstorm a few times in this game now, and it's just one of the most immersive things in the game, period. It's crazy, man. I really didn't think that the world would get that much better from the world in KCD 1. But I was wrong. Not only did the graphics get better, but Warhorse somehow managed to make the world bigger and more immersive. I recommend playing this game on the world design alone. Just wandering through the towns or hunting in the forest is something that's super simple but uniquely beautiful in KCD 2. Next up, let's talk about the gameplay. The main theme between this game and KCD1 is streamlining certain gameplay features and systems. Now, that's not to say that the game got any easier. It did not, at all. But certain systems and features did get easier to understand. Let's talk about the combat first. The combat is largely the same with a couple of improvements. For one, the sword fighting is way faster now, and I like that. It feels way more cinematic with you swinging and blocking in fractions of seconds. It makes it feel like a movie, which is something that I think the first game lacked a little bit. On top of that, Warhorse removed one of the regions that you can attack from, so the overall system feels way more streamlined. There aren't 5 distinct regions you can attack, now there are only 4. All the weapons from longswords to battle axes look, feel, and play really differently, which is always great to see. All attacking and blocking is also now done with the mouse, which is something that I didn't know I needed, but now that I've used it, makes KCD1's keybinds feel way worse. In KCD1, you attacked with the left mouse button and blocked with Q. In KCD2, you still attack with the left mouse button, but now block with the right mouse button. It allows for just such a smoother combat system, and it's something that's a quality of life change that I didn't know I needed. Overall though, the combat is still incredibly hard. And if you couldn't get into the combat in the first game, chances are KCD2 isn't going to move the needle for you in any way. However, I will say if you could tolerate the combat in the first game, or even if you enjoyed it in KCD1, this system is better in almost every way. The simulation elements are still present here in the game as well, but they've tuned down the ones that weren't really affecting the game in a meaningful way and amplified the ones that are really making a difference. For example, hunger was something in the first game that was more of a nuisance. Henry got hungry often, and you were constantly having to find him food to eat. It didn't add anything to the gameplay systems as most of the buffs you could get were applied through potions, so eating actual food didn't really do anything. In KCD2, Henry gets hungry way less often, so you don't have to worry about food as much. However, being clean was one of those things that actually affected the game in KCD1. In that game, if you were dirty, people would actively comment on you and talk about how you looked bad. In KCD2, they ramped that shit up to 11. You can now stink. And if you're stealthing and you're stinky, an enemy can smell you and be alerted. On top of that, you're perceived wildly differently when you're dirty. You won't be able to pass skill checks that have to do with nobility simply because you won't look like a noble. It's little things like this that make the game just so immersive. There are other cool simulation elements that they've put into the game as well. One of the main cool ones is blacksmithing. Henry is a blacksmith's son, so it's natural that he should have the ability to forge some of his own weapons if he can, and that's something that's present in the game. You can straight up work a 9-to-5 job in blacksmithing, making swords, axes, horseshoes, and then selling them off for a profit. On top of that, if you get the blueprint to a really cool weapon, as long as you have the materials for it, you can go out and make that sword on your own. This allows players to work for their own armor and weapons without needing a lot of money to spend. Let me tell you, if I didn't have to get through this game to make this video in a timely manner, I would absolutely spend days just working as a blacksmith, immersed in the world, and just living and working a normal 9-to-5 as Henry in 15th century Bohemia. The last thing I want to talk about gameplay wise is the progression. It's largely the same from the first game. You level up different categories by going out and doing the thing. If you want to level up swords, you have to go out and fight with the sword. If you want to level up your horsemanship, you have to go out and ride your horse. It was a really cool progression system in 2018, and it still is a really cool progression system now. The two complaints I had for KCD1 were that there were a lot of perks you could unlock within each category that had a weird caveat with them that made the perk kind of useless. For example, in the charisma category, there was a perk that would increase my charisma with men, but would lower it with women. Luckily, Warhorse eliminated those weird caveats. Now, when it's time for you to unlock a perk in a certain category, there isn't a weird debuff holding you back. you can just go out and pick the perk that most suits how you want to play, which is an extremely welcome change. The other thing I had an issue with was the speed at which you get good. Like the first game, your Henry starts out pretty bad at everything. I had a concern that it wouldn't make sense narratively for Henry to be just as bad as he was in the first game, because as the first game progresses, Henry starts becoming really capable, and I was worried that if they started Henry back again at 0, that it would just come across as unrealistic in a game so grounded in realism. Luckily, and I won't spoil it too much, they actually managed to make it make sense narratively, which is something that I really appreciate. However, I will say that I still think Henry gets too good too fast. If you go out and start doing side quests immediately after the game opens up, after the beginning like first hour or so of the game, your Henry can go out and get really good. To the point where the previous game, I felt like things started getting better around the 15-hour mark. In KCD 2, things start getting easier in the 5 to 10 hour mark depending on how fast you're running through the side quests. I guess it's something that's kinda inevitable though, just based on the nature of the game and how you level up in it. Look, in the beginning of the video, I said that if a developer can get as close to real life as possible with maintaining the integrity of the game systems, they create something special. I think KCD2 in this regard is something special. They removed most of the jank that made the gameplay in the first game tough to manage, while adding features and streamlining others in a way that maintains the difficulty of the game without sacrificing the fun. And that's what I call a masterclass in game design. The last aspect of this game that I want to talk about is the story. Now, the narrative in KCD1 was something that I didn't love. I didn't hate it or anything, and KCD1 definitely had memorable characters, but the story as a whole just didn't grip me in a way that I thought it should have. However, what the game exceeded at was quest design and player choice. In KCD2, they've amped up that player choice up to new heights while also delivering a really compelling narrative. For one, the production value on the cutscenes and the storytelling just in general is insanely higher than in the first game. Again, that makes sense. Warhorse probably didn't have all the funding they wanted to make the cutscenes as immersive as possible in the first game, and now they do. But the transitions, the beautiful cinematography, everything about the cutscenes and the way they tell the story is just so amazing. It also helps that I think the story in general is just way more interesting this time around. KCD2 is a direct continuation of the first game's story. There are complex political and economic things going on in this story that were really only touched upon in the first one. Henry is also already just a bit more of a badass this time around and is even more confident and sure of himself. Hans Capon is also the Hans Capon we know and love, the slightly narcissistic but lovable noble. Him and Henry's friendship is just something that's done really well throughout the game. All the new characters that are present in the game are also really well constructed. Zizka is an awesome addition, as well as Catherine. They both bring a great backstory and offer really great characterization. But, like last time, the bread and butter of the story is the quest design. I mentioned in my KCD1 review that I felt as though almost every main quest and side quest had probably 2 to 3 different endings to them based on the choices you made. I feel the exact same way here, except for the fact that there are now way more side quests and they are way more complex than the ones in the first game. Every single quest in this game, side or not, feels incredibly handcrafted. There's not a single quest in this game that just asks you to go here and do that thing. Every quest has twists and turns along the way and different choices to make. It's a level of player choice that I frankly have never seen in a video game before. It genuinely feels like real life at times. If I can think about completing this one quest a certain way, chances are I can complete it that way and it would offer me a different ending had I completed it another way. Another thing Warhorse has added are dynamic quests. There will be times when I'm just walking around the world where I stumble across something that kicks off an entire side quest. They're similar to the random encounters that you would experience in RDR2, except here they start full-fledged side quests. Early in the game, when I was on the quest to find Mutt, my dog, I came across a drunk gamekeeper stuck in a tree with wolves surrounding him. This felt super immersive. No one told me to go this way while searching for my dog, and I just happened to come across him while on my search. So I ended up killing the wolves and getting him down. But in the process of getting him down, he hurt his ankle. So I had to carry him to his hideout, and then by the time we got to his hideout, he realized that someone had stole his horse. So at this point, I was in way too deep helping this man, so I had to go out and find his horse for him. The quest itself was honestly pretty tedious, but I couldn't help but feeling immersed. I had completely forgotten about finding my dog at that point and was solely focused on helping him. When a game can make you forget your main objective that easily and encourage you to get sidetracked in such a way, that's a damn good feeling. Overall, man, there isn't much I can say about this game right now that I haven't already said. This game is beautiful, the world is immersive, the combat is fast and fluid, the narrative is compelling, and the quest design is some of the best, if not the best quest design I've ever seen in a game. Warhorse Studios has done something that AAA developers like Bethesda have been trying to do for decades. There is rarely such a game that hits on every aspect that makes a game and does so in such convincing fashion. Warhorse had a vision. They learned their lessons from the first game and knew what they wanted to do with this one. As far as I'm concerned, this is now in the top 3 of my favorite games I've ever played. Warhorse has solidified themselves as a force to be reckoned with in the RPG space, and I'm excited to see what they've got planned next. Either way, that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this topic content, make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to see more content like this. My last video was on a deep dive on Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, so I highly suggest checking that out. I also have a video on Avowed coming up next, and then AC Shadows after that, so stay tuned for those. But yeah, guys, it's been CGG. I'm out.